So we've been in Proverbs this summer, and we paused on Romans. And so just thinking back of where we've been these past couple weeks, we started just in a general sense, in a world full of competing voices. Wisdom begins by listening to the right one. We started with the fear of the Lord as the beginning of wisdom. That we tried to understand what wisdom is. And so understanding how God designed life to work, and then happily, not begrudgingly, not out of duty, but happily choosing to live according to the way God has designed life to work. And so we began evaluating in the Proverbs how he's outlined. If you could think of the Proverbs almost as an application of the Ten Commandments for the Israelite people, that they saw the Ten Commandments and then began asking, well, how do we live out this guideline for life? And so you could see Proverbs through that lens. Fred did a nice job just asking about our words. What does wisdom sound like? When we speak with all the words we use every single day, what does wisdom sound like as we speak to those around us? And then last week we evaluated anger. When anger bubbles up in our hearts, what is it? What do I do with my anger that reflects wisdom and my hope in God? This morning, we're going to continue that conversation of these pieces of life applied, this wisdom applied. And this morning, it's going to come from an idea that's embedded in this verse. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out. The idea that's in there gets captured in a famous quote by Mark Twain. He said, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. So what would it look like for us to live lives of integrity, to live honestly in our day-to-day in a world that is dishonest? What does it mean to live honestly in a world that may not have a grid for truth? What would it look like for us to live in God's design? And so that's where we're headed this morning. Living a life of integrity means pursuing truthfulness and honesty in all interactions, living as the same person in public and private because it flows from that Proverbs 1, the fear of the Lord, because you fear God more than people. And so where we're going to start is just identifying even what is integrity. So if you scan the code in front of you, it will take you to a bulletin page where there's an outline as well as the slides we walk through. That's all we're going to do. We're just going to walk through this idea of what does it mean to live with integrity. So it starts just by defining what integrity is. Integrity is this, through a few conversations this week in a variety of sources, being truthful and honest in all interactions, determined to promote things as they actually are. Therefore, then, what would lying be? When we deliberately present an inaccurate view in order to motivate someone else to think or act in a way they would not if they had an accurate picture. So what is integrity? So imagine you got a dinner invite from a friend, and they reach out and you go through the calendar, you finally stumble upon a time and a day that works, and you agree, yeah, let's do dinner that night. And then they begin preparing for your arrival. They begin purchasing food. They begin preparing their house, putting things together. And then on the day that you are planning to go to dinner with them, you get a call from a buddy. And he says, hey, I got Packer tickets for tonight. And not just Packer tickets, like club seats, free food, free seats, club box seats at a Packer game. Are you in? What do? What guides your decisions on how you move forward in this life? Here's what Solomon's going to tell us in chapter 2 of Proverbs, that we must put forth effort to hear God's voice and pray with desperate dependence for his answer and pursue integrity and wisdom enthusiastically. That do we just gain integrity through osmosis? We put on earbuds and we just kind of manifest integrity. No, instead, Solomon is going to tell us there's effort in this process. My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commands, if you listen, If you have ears to hear, listen for this wisdom, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight in your decisions, in your integrity, if you raise your voice for understanding, if you ask, God, I need your understanding so I can live this life of integrity. If you seek it like silver and search for it as hidden treasures. Does that sound like kind of a lackluster pursuit? No. You know what I love? One of those shows on like HGTV, Antique Roadshow. Like, you know that show? It's like they've gone, or Antique Roadhouse, right? Where they scour these different places looking for these hidden gems and antiques and treasures that have value. That we pursue wisdom and integrity enthusiastically. But do you catch the line of thought within it? If you believe this, if you seek this, if you listen, if you ask, there is embedded in the invitation the personal responsibility, and then God promises that he says he will provide. Not promises, but the invitation is he provides himself and he protects those in relationship with him. Here's what he says. Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find knowledge of God. For God gives wisdom. From his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the ways of his saints. God provides himself and protects those who are in relationship with him. And we cannot and do not have to hide from God, because he already knows it would be foolish to try and keep something from him. And therefore, if we live in that fear of him, we don't have to hide from others. But did you hear the language in there? The question becomes, well, what then is truth? And as we look around our culture, what it seems to me is that there is this general sense of a denial that there is truth. After defining what integrity is, we begin to see integrity tested under pressure. Proverbs, Solomon says that God is a shield to those who walk in integrity. In what way is God a shield? It's not that challenging circumstances will never hit our life, but he's a shield in the sense that he is now providing a way of life to be lived. That he's going to deliver and guard and shield in the sense that he's giving you the insight of wisdom for life, of a life of integrity. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity. So what was integrity again? Being truthful and honest in all interactions, determined to promote things as they actually are. So the shield then becomes increasingly giving us a picture of the way things actually are. Now, what's the challenge in this world? Not many would agree to a certain core idea of the way things are. That they would live this life of relativity. That the truth of relativism proclaims there is no objective truth. That in our world, many deny just some standard of truth. There is no absolute objective truth, or a particular individual or culture gets to determine their truth. You may have heard this on some Disney movie that just says, follow your heart. You get to determine your destiny. The denial that there is objective truth grounded in the character of the Almighty God or any other source. John Piper says it this way as he's describing this culture of relativism. Relativism poses as humble by saying, we're not smart enough to know what the truth is, or if there's any universal truth at all. It sounds so humble, but look carefully at what is happening. It is like a servant saying, I'm not smart enough to know which person here is my master, or even if I have a master. The result is that I don't have a master and therefore can be my own master. That is, in reality, what happens to relativists. In claiming to be too lowly to know the truth, they exalt themselves as the supreme arbiter of what they think they can do. This, in fact, is not humility. It is the essence of pride. How do you live with integrity when there is potentially no basis or grid for what truth is? Creating your truth does not equal discovering what God really said about the way life is to be lived in a life of integrity. So around here, the grid we operate with is there is a God, and he has revealed himself through the biblical text, and that then gives us an accurate picture of God, the world, and ourselves. I was interacting with a young man recently, and he asked me, David, how do I determine what birth control, if birth control is a biblical reality? What does the Bible have to say about weed? For the person who's a relativist, they get to determine how they'd answer either of those questions based upon whatever they feel. Instead, we attempt to say there's a biblical world view, and though the Bible may not specifically reference those two topics, it actually does have something to say about how we might choose this life of integrity. In terms of relativism, here's the appeal to relativism. It sounds tolerant. It sounds open-minded. It makes it seem as if all ideas are equally valid and attempts to promote humility and diminishes the responsibility of the person making those choices or encouraging others in their choices. It's tolerant. Well, I can't determine what would be best for you. I have no grid. I'm just going to be more tolerant and accepting of whatever choices you make in this life. Or open-minded. You know, I'm just so open-minded in my approach that I allow so many varying ideas. The aversion to objective truth, it's seen as intolerant or close-minded, or as if you're acting with a level of superiority. Who are you to judge my actions? What makes you superior in who you are to levy any kind of condemnation for my choices? The aversion to objective truth is that it is perceived to promote arrogance and demands some level of responsibility to some objective standard. Thaddeus Williams, in his book, Don't Follow Your Heart, presses in to the limits of relativity. He says this: It is easy to be relativists when it suits us, especially if we hate conflict. But the second that someone cuts us off on the freeway or cuts the queue in front of us. You ever been at Hy-Vee or Costco and then they open up another line and you're next, and then they let some other knucklehead behind you jump to the front of the line? Doesn't that drive you nuts? Drives me bananas. It cuts to the queue in front of us, hacks our online identity, breaks into our car, slanders us behind our back, or takes too long delivering our order. All are sanctimonious slogans about not passing judgment and others living their truths evaporate internally in the heat of our moral indignation. What happens to our truth when we're confronted with some type of moral standard that we no longer adhere to, and it starts to actually affect us? So let's just walk through then how integrity is tested under pressure. Integrity is grounded in objective truth, not relativism. That there is some grid for which we are operating. And then a life of integrity built with God over time does get revealed under pressure. Imagine you just had a very long day at work. And there was enough fires that you were putting out. There was enough challenges. You are emotionally spent and exhausted, and your drive home was not long enough to provide that cool down time maybe that you've been used to. Or potentially at the beginning of your day as a stay-at-home parent, you offered your kids an opportunity to read a book at bedtime. You said, I promise I'll read that book to you. But then as the day went on, the day just got out of control. It was absolutely exhausting. Things that you had planned did not fall into line, and now it is bedtime, and your child says, hey, remember when you told me you'd read me a book? If you get home, you're still heated, and your spouse kicks up their feet and says, all right, you're in charge. What happens to your integrity in that moment of saying you may have given your spouse a chance to relax? Do you follow through? When your kid asks you to read that book and now the day is spent and you come to bedtime to tuck them in and they say, you going to read me that book? Where does your integrity take you in terms of what you had committed to? A life of integrity built with God gets revealed under pressure. Possibly, you say, I'll read you that book tomorrow. It's not a big deal. Maybe you say to whatever chores might have been waiting for you, maybe like mowing the lawn. I know nothing about that. Those will get put off till tomorrow. What does it mean that a life of integrity built with God gets revealed under pressure? And a life of integrity does not shield us from being falsely accused. When Solomon uses the word shield, he's not intending that somehow we're averse to challenging circumstances. That's not what he means by shield. We know that because we watch the story of Joseph. Though living with integrity was demeaned, removed from his position, falsely accused, chased out of the home. It was not thrown in prison. This was not an advantageous life for Joseph, though he was falsely accused in spite of living a life of integrity. Temptation to compromise our integrity will sometimes present itself with obvious or immediate consequences or potentially obvious or immediate rewards. I think of the student who's just received the test and could peer over their left shoulder to the A student who's sitting right next to them and could simply look over and determine what answers to write down on their own Scantron or test. The greatest danger, though, is not just in the extreme, but the subtle movement of the heart away from God. Like the test, in the immediate, there may be an immediate reward, but maybe down the line, that heart of dishonesty starts to catch up with you. I think of the couple who may be on their wedding vows, committed to one another, with no plans on ever compromising or cheating on one another, and yet, one phone call, one text, one lunch, one late night, suddenly snowballs into an affair that no one saw coming. The greatest danger is not in the extreme, but these subtle movements of integrity where we're compromising on the way God designed life to work. And though God does not always keep us or shield us from challenging circumstances, maybe the way we believe, He does promise that He will always be with us in it and deliver us as He sees fit. When we read Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as they describe their unwillingness to compromise to idols, they're thrown in a fire, and they said, should God deliver us in that way, He's going to choose. What do we know from the story? There was a fourth man in the fire. But that is not always the case. But here's the confidence. The ultimate deliverance is found in Christ alone and is always available. And so when we make steps that demonstrate this integrity, this truth of the way God designed life to work, it becomes a platform for God's glory to be beheld. We don't build our integrity in crisis. It is in those moments it's revealed, and sometimes there are others watching for how we conduct ourselves in the midst of challenging circumstances. What is integrity? It is tested under pressure and then gets reflected in the wisdom of God to a watching world. We're going to walk through Proverbs 2 a little bit more, and just to see how Solomon unpacks this benefits of integrity, of the wisdom of God, the benefits of His wisdom applied to a watching world. God protects us by giving us wisdom to grow us step by step into people of integrity. Here's what He says in Proverbs 2. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity in every good path. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will watch over you. Understanding will guard you, delivering you from the way of evil. Again, what deliverance, what shield, what guarding? It's revealing God's design for the way life is intended to work. Watch the two categories now that He provides for how He helps us discern and avoid those promoting evil. You're doing a great job, Riley. He delivers us from the evil way, from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech who forsake the paths of righteousness to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perseverance of evil. Men whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. We talk about how bad company corrupts good morals, that the people you choose to be around, you start to become like. And so he's offering a chance to discern the path, to shield you, to guard you. And then there's one other category he provides. We're going to do 2 weeks on human sexuality, I think in August, to develop more of what he alludes to here. So you will be delivered from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. For her house sinks down to death and her paths to the departed. None who go to her home come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. Solomon is giving us this grid for integrity, how to discern and avoid evil, to be guarded and shielded. But then he doesn't just stay in the negative, he brings it back to the positive. He says this, there's an offer of direction and clarity to live full, happy lives, so that you will walk in the way of the good and keep the paths of the righteous. For the upright will inhabit the land, and those with integrity will remain in it. He's offering us a way to say, you want a full, happy life. Here is the path of integrity. So that when you walk around, like Mark Twain said, I never need to remember my story. Who did I tell this story to, and how would I cover my paths here? How do I not bring this to light, and what would it might look like to not live that way, but remain in integrity? And we understand there are people who live less truthful in this life. He addresses that. But the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the treacherous will be rooted out of it. We understand there's people that maybe don't live with integrity, and yet the general principle is, do we see in our world people who have chosen to not live with integrity pay a cost? I think so. You think back to the 70s, Richard Nixon, Watergate. It wasn't so much about the burglary that people were maybe frustrated about. What was it? It was the cover-up. Does anybody know the name Lance Armstrong? Yeah. Bicyclist. And yet, in his desire to win, cheated. He did not live with integrity, and as a result, what did it cost him? A significant amount of money. Think of Brian Williams, the anchor. He told a story about how he was in Iraq on a helicopter in a war zone, and yet what came to light was that was not true. What did it cost him? He was no longer the trusted voice on a news system. Instead, he was removed from that role. Does the name Martha Stewart mean anything to you? Insider trading cost her significantly, including jail time. For the amount of what? Does anybody remember the amount that she chose to compromise her integrity over? It was in the tens of thousands, but what did it cost her? Millions. A story that's come to my mind recently, Shohei Ohtani. He's like the greatest baseball player of our era. Pitcher, hitter. I don't know why the Angels let him go, goes to the Dodgers, and they are just dominating now. And his manager, Missouri Hara, I think, might be something like that. I mean, Shohei doesn't speak English, right? And so this guy is like his right-hand man. I mean, he is riding this wave, and yet what does his manager choose to do? Again, gamble and cheat, withhold, steal from Ohtani. So then what happens? He's no longer in that trusted position, and he ends up going to jail. We can see in our world examples of where the wicked are cut off from the land, and yet those who live in an upright way live with just this happier countenance, not having to pretend. And so the question then becomes is, what does it look like to daily align ourselves to this life of integrity? Here's what Solomon says in the Proverbs, for the upright will inhabit the land. because they will walk in the way of the good and keep to the paths of the righteous. And so what would it look like for us to live and have a daily alignment towards this life of integrity? My encouragement, start with just assessing your current attitude towards truth. Do you believe there is an objective truth, an objective reality that governs your decisions? What would make you choose to go to that dinner that night or get Packer tickets? Is there some objective standard that then guides that you had committed to something and would not forfeit your word? Then maybe be aware of where our integrity is most tempted in this life. For you, do we tend to use language that would make ourselves look better in the eyes of others? Do we tend to exaggerate certain ideas so that we're seen better? Or let me offer a grid that might help us determine how we would be aware of where our integrity is most tempted. First, and this would be, for me, this is how I see the world here. As I'm interacting with any situation, I want to gather data, and then I want to reflect on what has been shared. I want to then maybe design some type of path or course of action that I might take in this particular situation, and then I want to act. And then it goes back to another situation where I may gather data. Here's the challenge. How long do we have in the timeline of our decisions for integrity? How long are those? Usually, like we talked about last week, I don't sit there and go, should I be angry or should I not be angry? What do I do? I just get angry. I don't sit there and go, to what degree should I be patient or impatient? I just get impatient. And so sometimes when there's a moment for our integrity to be shown, that runway of decision time to actually walk through all four of those steps is very short. And so when this is happening is not, when your moment for integrity is there, that is not the moment to be walking through these steps. Instead, that is happening earlier in our life. I would encourage you, every morning, pause, whether that's a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Pray that God would help you get rid of any unholy complacency towards integrity that may come across your day, either planned or unplanned. And then we believe this is not intended to be a lone sport. This is not golf. This is not tennis, right? This is a team sport. Well, some of you tennis players and golf players would say, well, it's a team sport. It's not a solo sport. Seek guidance about how best to confront integrity issues that may arise. Because maybe for you, there's a time that you begin to avoid conflict because honesty just feels too risky in the situation, whether in your work or with your spouse, or with your coworkers, your neighbors, your friends. Honesty just feels too risky. Seeking guidance about how to confront issues and being aware of where you might be tempted. Do you tend to, as you're sharing stories, leave out important details that would then give people a more favorable perspective of you? I took my kids fishing. The day after school finished, we did a half-day charter on Lake Michigan out of Oak Creek. And when I tell the story of fishing, we ended up landing 9 fish, brought in 9 fish into the boat. But the way I tell the story is we landed 9 fish, but we got one just up into the boat and it just got off. So that's technically 10. And then we got 4 other hits that we reeled in mostly, but it didn't quite get there. So really, it's like we got 14 fish that day, right? What do we say that presents a maybe more favorable position and maybe condemns others? What if I added something like, but you know why we only got 9 fish is because the boat driver really wasn't getting us on fish. I mean, it was really his fault. And you know, if he'd just let us stay out a little bit longer, then we could have figured it out. Maybe where your integrity is most tempted is when you blame shift or justify your actions at the expense of someone else. What would it look like to seek guidance on how to best confront whatever integrity issue might arise? Around here for us, Monday Matters is a way to lift our eyes to say, what does it mean for us if we do believe there is objective truth to live in light of the way God designed life to work? What would that look like this week? Here's my encouragement. Make a list of the costs of compromising your integrity and what's that produced. Where can you look back in your life, and maybe it's not Martha Stewart or Shohei Ohtani's manager level, but maybe you can look back and see different areas where compromising your integrity has cost you. Reflect on that. Make a list this week. And then make a list, go back to Proverbs 2, and list the benefits that are listed that come with living wisely and living with integrity. Solomon outlines a bunch that we moved fairly quickly through. Go back and spend some time thinking through the benefits that God, through Solomon, speaks about the benefits of living with integrity. And then, maybe, even as you're thinking through this now, there's a relationship that starts to pop up in your head. Is there a relationship in which you've shaded the truth? Maybe this is an invitation to reconcile and confess and address that issue so that you can move forward with clarity and honesty, living a life of integrity. I'm going to invite the worship team up. For us, I hope at Hillcrest, here is our overarching cry that in this invitation of wisdom in a noisy world in Proverbs, that we would be people that commit to living with integrity in all of life and in all circumstances and in all relationships because of our fear of God driving those decisions. Pray with me as we continue in worship. God, you are so good. The reality of pain and challenges in this life feels immense at times. Help us with the breath we have, with the choices we make to live lives of integrity that reflect our hope and our trust in you. Thank you, Jesus. Always for your glory we pray. Amen.